So there I was, logged into nocturnetotem.com. Good old Call of Duty zombies. The designs of the levels, the wonder weapons, the perk machines are some of my favorites out of any game. They just have so much personality and tell a greater story that spans across the game, even if that story gets pretty bonkers by the end. Anyway, there I was in one of my favorite maps.
Ascendio.
The one with the quirked up monkeys. Naturally, I tracked down the go-to perk of this map. Did you know the Juggernog is literally right behind this door here? It's always been so horrible whenever I've opened up this door that I just sort of deleted it out of my mind, but it's always been right here. Looking at it for the 5 billionth time, I was inspired. And it was there, sitting in that room, where I decided I wanted to challenge myself. Dual pistols only, in an older version of the game. Or rather, I wanted to artistically challenge myself. I was going to design, model, and render a stylized version of the classic Juggernog perk machine. But first, I needed to figure out what style to actually go for. I wanted to keep the strengths of what made the original machine so iconic, while keeping my own interpretation in mind. Gooky was the key. It's real, look it up. The vibrant red color, wacky angle shapes, and decorative lettering were here to stay. I wanted to keep the 1940s and 50s vintage design the machine was rooted in intact. Secondly, there was the art style itself. Now for this, I hopped aboard my sloop and set sail to Tomato Town. I've installed 4 games on my PC for about 10 seconds of clips now. This needs to stop. I was thinking I wanted a chug jug full of nog, maybe just a dash of a little grog. In reality though, I didn't actually end up using many artistic cues from Sea of Thieves, even though it is kind of my favorite art style out of any game. It's just too outside my wheelhouse now, pun intended. In fact, the whole thing would end up looking like it's more from Team Fortress 2 than anything else. So, to start off, I began with a little bit of sketch work in Procreate. I just cobbled together a few reference images from different versions of the machine, as well as the original Coke vending machine that the machine was based off of. Basically, all I did at this point was accentuate the angles a bit more, and one thing I did was I sharpened up some of the more rounder angles, and then rounded out some of the more sharper angles of the machine, and it gave it this kind of interesting contrast to the original design. And I ended up actually liking that direction. All I sketched out was the front view of the machine, since the sides are pretty plain except for a slight angle where the chrome part is, and so I just went ahead and jumped into Blender with it. It was pretty straightforward to knock out a few basic shapes, and then from there I just went kind of crazy with the subdivision surface modifier. In fact, I also did some manual beveling here when I wish I had used the bevel modifier as well, but later on I took a more non-destructive approach. Just wish I did that earlier on with the actual machine. But it did kind of help me reinforce that sharp where it's curved and curved where it's sharp idea, which I regretted towards the beginning, but then by the end I actually kind of fell in love with that look. Or maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome with the design, I don't know. I usually like to get a general feel for the materials early on, just to make sure it's going in the right direction. Here is actually one of my first kind of creative liberties with this. I'm not doing the regular kind of shell that top light is in, the sort of like white, almost plasticky looking shell that the machine, at least in Black Ops 3, has. I'm doing with a more rounded chrome shell, just because I think that looks kind of nicer. I'm not sure if the Quick Revive machine has chrome as its shell for that, but if it does, then you know, I think it looks nice there too. But in the meantime, yeah, I think the chrome is a really good, nice look for it, and it matches the trim and this front plate that I'm working on right now. I'm just doing some basic bump mapping in Affinity Photo. I've got looks like don't even have the UVs exported. I'm just screenshotting the front of it. It works. I did a little bit of that back and forth, you know, just sometimes doing the quick way instead of the technically correct way. But if it works, it works. I do wish that I don't know why I went with bump maps and not displacement maps. I think, you know, okay, I'm not really used to doing this so much in Blender. I'm a lot more used to it in Unity of all things, and so I just kind of like, it's like, oh, I want displacement. There's probably a bump map since there's already normal maps in here. But yeah, I should have looked more into the displacement modifier and all of that beforehand. But in the end, it's such a small thing, and I think it served its purpose pretty well in the final renders. Just trying to get all the details, well, not really the details, but the general points of it. The exact opposite of details. All of the major components of what's on that front thing, which I'm not even though I've studied it so much, I'm not even sure what entirely is on all these things. I had to assume, I just have to guess what that text there is actually. There, I know it says something there. I don't even think it's the change collection, because I think that's later on. I just went for it going forward right into this graphic design phase. You can see here, I'm doing, it looks similar to the bump mapping, but these are going to be actual graphics printed on the front of the machine, using a different material, not the chrome, but it's the same shapes that I used for the chrome bump mapping, and so it lines up perfectly. For better or for worse, you know, like a little bit of misalignment there wouldn't have hurt, but speaking of misalignment, you can see I'm just kind of like adding in this filler text, and then I'm going in and adjusting all those vertices to be, you know, sometimes a little bit different, sometimes like drastically different, just to give it so much more character than an out-of-the-box font would have. I especially love that 10 cents kind of stretched out, really cartoonish look. Right here we have a little Procreate section. This, I'm gonna admit, I pretty much did not use at all in the final thing, in the final render, but I thought it looked pretty cool. And there's actually little bits and pieces of this that I used. That 10 cents right there, the little flavor text, like, that's a good nog. I ended up using those in there. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about them being in the final piece, but it does give it character, and so that's why I left them instead of just trying to replace them. I think it still would have come out good in the end if I had done a similar technique that I did previously with just like the font and, you know, tweaking the vertices a little bit, making it a little bit more cartoonish, giving it character that way. But you know, it was an experiment, and it didn't completely fail, and it's character nonetheless. I think it fits in its own way. It at least gave me a good foundation for what I ended up wanting, especially with the drink, how I formatted that text. But as you can see, I just gave up, and I'm roughly tracing over the normal Juggernog text. I'm going to just kind of skew, again, the vertices there, give it its own character. Something that kind of really confused me, or like, it stood out to me, and I never really realized it until I'm literally looking at the font for making this thing, is that the original Juggernog machine, the text is like this backwards italics thing. It feels so off. Like, I don't know why it wasn't just a normal kind of like slanted to the right italics. My only theory is to kind of fit that 10 cent blob there. So for my interpretation, I'm going with regular italics. Just styling in the colors right. I didn't actually have full black there for the drink. I just went with a really dark red. I really like to try not to go to such extremes like complete whites or complete blacks. I like try to give some sort of middle ground to help the character bleed through and all that. And I say that as I'm showing you that I'm gonna have a complete white on this lamp logo, which I think it turned out pretty well. I'm not used to doing vector art too often for just stuff from scratch like this, but I really, really like how this came out. But in defense of what I just said like 30 seconds ago, the reason I did complete white for this was just because it was going to be at a mission, and it was going to blow out to be white anyway. This needed to be white because it's literally light, you know? So that's going to be an exception to the rule that I said a minute ago. Just trying to play with like little ways for that red to bleed out. That red blur really doesn't show much at all in the final emission texture, but it was just a little something to try to give a little bit more detail. I had no idea it said this on the side. I had no idea it said this freaking phrase on the side. I just brought in Times New Roman, and I think that's Cooper Black is that other font. It's like the Vote for Pedro font. I'm pretty sure those are actually the exact fonts that are on the machine, but I've just taken them and screwing them up a bit to... Again, I'm going to keep using the word adding some more character. I also want to mention, so obviously the machines in game, they're very kind of like used, beat up, a bit rusted, and that's not the kind of look that I wanted for this machine. I wanted it to be not quite like brand new, but somewhere maybe about like a month or two into operation, if that makes any sense. I wanted there to be imperfections, but I didn't want it to be dirty. In fact, the only kind of piece of real like dirt or wear you're gonna see on this is gonna come up a bit later, and that's going to be the bloody handprint on the other side of the machine. Yeah, so for making a bloody hand, I just kind of took a practical approach. I used my own hand, I got it all dirty with some red paint, and I just smeared it on a big piece of paper, fixing the thumb a little bit. I took that right into Affinity Photo, keyed out the paper, and brought it into another texture. This is the Ice Cold font. I was just searching through the fonts, and I was like, oh, I accidentally just found the exact font that was used on the machine. Not that I was going to use it as is. Again, taking the vertices, skewing them around, giving them some cartoon style. I actually really like how this came out, and I love this side of it. Right here, the hand is a bit kind of like, it's very bright red. I ended up changing that to be a little bit darker later on, so it's not so like, so it's a little bit more believable, I guess. But it's actually like, that side is one of my favorite angles of the machine. I just love how that handprint came out. It was really worth dirtying up my hand. On the front, I'm just doing a little bit more bump maps for the red paneling, and then I'm going to have some actual chrome little fixings on the front modeled there. One thing I wanted to add was on the side of the machine, or actually any of the graphics on the machines, the issue with applying UVs straight onto the subdivision surface parts is that the textures warp a bit, and that's something that I've known about, but I've never really done this kind of modeling as in depth as I am here, and so I wasn't sure any proper ways to avoid that. What I just did as a stopgap fix was to warp the textures in Affinity Photo in the opposite kind of direction that they were warping in here. You might have seen that I was like stretching and squashing the text a bit in order to dial in something that looked okay on it. And it really helps that I was going for a stylized look anyway, because it would have been kind of a nightmare getting that as realistic looking as possible. But you know, all this, it was supposed to be like a learning experience, something that challenged myself, as I mentioned in the intro. I actually did want to just kind of like see like how far I can push myself with all the little bits and bobs of Blender knowledge and texturing and all that. And see how far I can take it. You might have seen there, I'm just trying to add a little bit of detail to the chrome and that front kind of lamp as well. Again, going for that like slight imperfections look. It really helps sell more of a realistic look, but not necessarily like, obviously like it's such a cartoony looking machine, but from a texture standpoint. And here, I'm really playing with this brick here. I stole this brick, and later on you'll see I stole some floor, kind of like stone slates, from an earlier project, an old game project I was working on like in 2018. I just stole these assets from that to make a nice brick wall and kind of like broken like concrete slab floor. Gave the bricks a little bit more love, beveled a little bit, some noise texturing. I ended up really loving how these bricks came out in the end. That work that I put into them a few years ago is really paying off now. I'm really glad I had those on hand. They were close enough to the style that the machine was in to fit into the scene, and I really wanted like a cool brick wall, and the flooring matched too. This like broken, deteriorated thing. I pictured this machine kind of being in the Dries location with that like, you know, rundown German factory kind of look, and I think it really tied the final renders together. Actually, speaking of that, this pipe, I wanted something else in the scene, but I didn't have the time to do any perk bottles. I wish I did. I wanted something to contrast it, and so I was like, okay, what if I just have like this dark metal pipe coming down? And wow, it really, in my opinion, it really helps sells it. And at this point, I'm already trying out some renders. Actually, all the rendering and kind of post-processing effects that you're going to see here, I've made a mask layer to a mask render. These don't get used, but they serve the foundation for the final renders, and so it's like I have the same angle, the same everything. You might not even be able to notice the differences, but I just kept finding little things that I needed to tweak in the model to re-render. You probably just saw that the stem for the light was there was a gap in it. All sorts of little things, texture things, stuff with this fog. Again, actually, the fog and the pipe are the MVPs of this render, in my opinion. So for the lighting of this, I just kind of did kind of a basic 3-point lighting. I had a very warm orange glow on the lower left-hand side. That was kind of to mimic the fire look of Dries and give it a nice edged light to a lot of the aspects of the front of the machine. And I have a couple of blue lights, one of them like more of a dark blue to the right, and then a lighter blue near the front, top front, I guess. Moonlight, rather. It kept accidentally looking at like a street light. I'm like, this doesn't exactly fit, but moonlight, oh yeah, that's perfect. Right here you can see I'm tweaking even just the positioning of certain objects. In the final renders, I have that pipe and the fog in different positions for pretty much every, if not most of the angles, and you can't tell unless, or in my opinion, you can't tell unless you look for it, because I moved them in a way that made it so it was hard to notice that they were in a different position. The way they were turning out was, like in this one, you were able to tell that that pipe was kind of far away from the machine, but if you pointed the camera towards it in the other direction, the machine would cover up the pipe, and so I wanted to move it a little bit further. And same with the fog, with that kind of front-on look that was very close up to the front text of the machine. There was no fog in it, but I still wanted there to be a little bit of fog in the final render, and so I just bumped it up to try and kind of like just barely make it over. And so you're like, oh yeah, the fog, yeah, this fog in the scene. See me doing a little bit of brick patchwork. Again, these weren't the final renders, but they were pretty close, and they gave me a good starting point for the workflow. Affinity, it ended up just being a little bit of exposure work, a little bit of color grading, making the right-hand side of the wall more blue. That was pretty much it as far as post-processing went. And I'm so excited to finally show you guys the final renders of this. I'm very happy. I'm not always happy with how my stuff comes out, but I was really, really happy with how these came out. I think it serves as a pretty good baseline for myself to know what I'm capable of and what I can do in the future, but also a good reality check of like, hey, like I wanted to do kind of like the Sea of Thieves look with all this like handcrafted kind of metals and materials, but I'm just not there yet. And that's a point that I want to explore more in the future and to learn more about in the future. Even parts that I just kind of like, I feel like I cheat in this. I mentioned about the UVs and the subdivision and all that, and just like kind of like rewarping it in Affinity, just trying to like counteract that. It felt like a hack basically. I'm like, I know that can't be, it isn't the right way to do it, but I want to know like, okay, what is the right way? How do I avoid these problems in the first place? All sorts of little stuff on a scale from like, I learned how to do something new in this, to I know there's something that I need to know in this, or like I should be doing this next time. There's a whole world of like, I don't even know what I need to do to make it look like Sea of Thieves or something. And yeah, but overall, thank you guys so much for watching this long. I had 10 hours of this time-lapse footage, and so this video was like twice as long as I wanted it to be, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I've got an art station where I post the final models for this. I've also got a Twitter and Instagram that I'm trying to keep updated now. I'm gonna try to put out more projects like this, and let me know what you guys thought, what you guys might want to see in the future. And again, thanks so much for being here.